guys, how are you all doing? Really? That's just great. You know, I'm doing pretty great today too, because lately I've been wanting to do more editorial review type episodes on this show. So I thought, why not get a practice run in with something that's not brand spanking new, but more rather something that's pretty special to me that I've had for a long time. My near 7-year-old 2013 MacBook Pro. So I bought this Mac immediately after the special event in October 2013. And here we are, 6 3/4 years later, and I'm still using it every single day. Personally, I just bought it to try to get through college, but it's lasted me a lot longer than those 2 years. Now, before I dive into more of my experiences, let's take a look at the specs of this computer. This Mac features a 2880 by 1800 Retina display with an LED backlight. Below the display is a backlit keyboard with an ambient light sensor, so the keyboard knows when to turn on automatically. And there's also a multi-touch glass trackpad. Inside, the computer is equipped with a 2.6 GHz quad-core Intel Core i7, an NVIDIA GeForce 750M, 16 gigs of RAM, and an upgraded 1TB PCIe SSD. Port-wise, we have Thunderbolt 2, USB 3 Type-A, a headphone jack, full-size HDMI, and an SD card reader. You know, it feels kind of interesting, a little weird in a way, listing off these specs because they're not brand spanking new specs, but they're also not very vintage. It's still a great computer. I get asked a ton about when I'm going to upgrade. And to be honest, I've thought about getting a new MacBook Pro, but one of the main things that has held me back is the lack of ports. Honestly, without conversion technology, I can't do much in terms of plugging my stuff in with the new MacBook Pro. Now, I understand I'm going to have to move that direction eventually because things need to change. But for now, what's the point in spending money on something that I can't use as well if this thing works and it has all the ports I need? Now, especially for me, doing photo and video stuff, it's really nice to be on the go and not have to worry about bringing an SD card reader or an HDMI Thunderbolt adapter or any of that stuff. It's all built in. Not to mention, another thing that kept me away from the newer MacBook Pros is the butterfly keyboard. I heard too many horror stories about the keyboard just failing or a single key not working, and I can't take that chance when I'm doing serious work on the go. Now, I know Apple switched back to scissor switches, so everything is all dandy again, but I don't know why they really needed to switch away from the scissor switch in the first place. It kind of just feels like they were trying to solve a problem that really didn't exist, and in doing so, they actually created more problems. Also, I haven't heard a lot of good things about the MacBook Pro's cooling system. I'm sure it's okay for most people, but truthfully, with how much power is in that computer and how thin it is, the thermal cooling capabilities of that thing are not really that adequate. Now, hopefully when Apple ditches Intel for their own silicon, they'll be able to control this issue a lot more. But as of right now, with that Intel chip in there, yeah, the cooling really isn't what it should be. This has just been working out for me just fine. But with time, it kind of has a hard time keeping up with my workflows, and that's a bit of a problem, but we'll talk about that in a bit. First, I want to talk about how I was able to milk so much time out of this computer using certain types of software that are just really optimized, even for the older hardware. Every video you have seen on the Computer Clan YouTube channel within the last 6 3/4 years was edited and rendered on this notebook. It has gone many miles, metaphorically and physically. A big reason I'm able to squeeze so much life out of this computer is because of Apple's hardware-software integration. In fact, that's one of the main reasons I like to use the Mac. The heart of my camera rig, my main camera rig, is a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 6K, and one of the codecs it supports is Apple ProRes. So I use an Apple codec with Apple's Final Cut Pro software. So Apple codec, Apple software, Apple hardware, it's all optimized to work together. Even though the computer is nearly 7 years old, it still screams. And I've been able to have high-speed scrubbing, high-speed playback, and more with Final Cut Pro, even on the older hardware. And with Adobe software, not so much. Now, to Adobe's credit, they recently updated their software some more and gave it some significant performance improvements, but it didn't always used to be that fast. So good job, Adobe. Now, don't get me wrong, there's still some features about Adobe Premiere that I like, and I wish Final Cut Pro would steal those features, but overall, the longevity I can get out of this computer with Final Cut Pro, plus the unique feature set Final Cut Pro offers, is just what makes me want to stay on that platform. Plus, another nice thing is you only have to pay once, $299 once, for the Final Cut Pro app, as opposed to selling your soul for an Adobe monthly subscription. Final Cut's sister application, Motion, also runs incredibly fast. I use that to make so many motion graphics you see on the channel. And the cool thing is, with its rendering capabilities, it can do all of this stuff in near real time, even with 3D objects and reflections, whereas with other programs you may have to wait for the screen to redraw quite a bit. And again, you're not getting as much performance out of an older computer because the software isn't optimized. And I've told people this many times, and of course you can use whatever program you want, but the problem is, if you have unoptimized software, it doesn't matter how badass your hardware rig is, right? If your software doesn't know how to leverage what's in that computer, you're just wasting resources. So overall, it's been doing pretty well, but it's not perfect, and with almost 7 years of use, some things are starting to wear out just a little bit. One thing I never liked about this computer are the speakers. Yeah, they're built-in speakers, so whatever, but they buzz at certain frequencies, and that's not a defect with this particular unit, that's just how they are. The newer speakers on the newer MacBook Pros are way better. Another issue I've noticed over time is the film peeling from around the FaceTime camera. Now, I know Apple issued a free fix for that, but I don't know, it didn't really bother me that much, and I didn't want to be without my computer for 2 weeks or however long Apple would need it. Cosmetic-wise, the computer is in really good shape. Just a few little, chips out of the aluminum, I guess, and a small little dent here from being a little too uncareful with it when it was in my backpack one day. But overall, it looks pretty darn clean, thanks to my secret formula. It's called taking care of your shit. Another weird issue I've had is the right USB port will sometimes just stop working when you plug something into it. Now, it won't just abruptly disconnect stuff if something's already plugged in, but let's say there's nothing plugged in and you go to plug in a new peripheral. Sometimes it will just not acknowledge it. Not really sure why, but again, it didn't do that at first. It's about 7 years old, so it's a little forgivable. Also, to no surprise, the battery is kind of on its way out. Coconut battery reports the health usually between 75 and 80%, sometimes it fluctuates. These batteries are typically made for about 5 years of use before you notice actual battery life issues, and I've started noticing them maybe about a year ago, so about 6 years into it. So it did its job quite all right, but it is starting to go. Apple does have a rather cheap replacement program, so I'm sure I'll do that eventually. But now we come to the bigger problem, and this is what has been making me contemplate an upgrade. Speed. Yes, Final Cut Pro has been able to keep up very well, but I've moved all of my workflows over to 4K. I shoot in 4K, I export in 4K, and it's starting to kind of bog down the system a bit, especially if there's multiple clips playing at once and there's color grading effects going on. The playback can sometimes be pretty choppy. Even in the better performance mode. The better performance mode helps a lot in Final Cut Pro, but it still does lag quite a bit when everything's in 4K. Heck, even the audio sometimes will cut out and fall behind, and it's manageable. It's just, I'll be honest, for the past 5 or 6 months or so, ever since I did the 4K transition, it's been a pain in the butt. 1080p though, no problem at all. It can just cut right through that. Another thing with 4K is exporting. Now, the exporting time isn't terrible. Overall, Final Cut is very speedy with that. But sometimes, generally I've noticed this when I have it plugged into an external display, when I'm rendering 4K video in Final Cut Pro, window animations and other multitasking abilities just kind of drop down, and it's kind of tough to use other applications while it's rendering and connected to an external display. But what's even worse, and when I say worse, I mean practically impossible, is HEVC, H.265. There's no hardware accelerated HEVC encoding in this computer, so if I wanted to export anything with HEVC, which is the same quality as H.264 typical video, but it's about half the file size, if I wanted to export anything with that, well, it takes hours. So in practice, it's just not an option on this computer. But all of those issues I mentioned will be eliminated whenever Apple releases that frickin' new iMac. Come on, Apple, I'm waiting. I'm just gonna throw money at your face, but you have to actually release something first. And then I will buy it. And then this will become a field machine. One day, Apple, one day. And I would argue that the 2013 to 2015 MacBook Pros were Apple's most perfect MacBook Pro design. It had that perfect balance of new and familiar. It had all the ports people need. The keyboard didn't just randomly fail at times. It didn't overheat nearly as much, if at all. I've never experienced it. And of course, they still have that glowing Apple logo on the back. So it's no wonder that I stuck with this thing for almost 7 years. I'm also curious as to how long you guys would typically keep your computers, because I used to upgrade every other year, but as you can see with this one, like I've said, I've stuck with it for almost 7 years, so feel free to let me know about that down below. And if you want to support the channel and get some other cool stuff from myself and from the Computer Clan, feel free to click the join button below the video so you can get all of that. And if that button doesn't show up for some reason, you can use a link in the description. Thanks in advance for your support. Other than that, all I want to say is feel free to stick around for more tech videos every week, usually on Thursday. I'll see you then. Thanks for sticking with me. Catch the Krazy and pass it on.